My brother sold our father's house before the funeral flowers had wilted. I found out from a neighbor, not from him. Mrs. Kowalski called me while I was standing in a grocery store parking lot, keys in my hand, and said, "Elena, honey, I saw a sold sign go up on your dad's place yesterday. I figured you knew." I didn't know. I didn't know anything. My name is Elena Marsh. I'm 38 years old, an architect at a mid-sized firm in Columbus, Ohio, and exactly 11 days earlier, I had stood at my father's graveside in a black coat that was too thin for the wind, holding my brother Daniel's hand while we lowered him into the ground. Daniel had cried harder than I had. He'd said, "I'll take care of everything, Elena. You don't need to worry about the house or the estate stuff. Let me handle it." I believed him. That was my first mistake. Our father, Walter Marsh, had built a small construction company from nothing. He started with one truck and a set of second-hand tools in 1979, and by the time he retired, he owned 3 commercial properties, a modest but comfortable house on Linden Avenue, and just under $600,000 in savings and investments. He wasn't rich by the standards of the people I designed buildings for, but he was careful. He was proud. He used to say, "A dollar saved is a brick laid. You don't see the wall until you've laid 1,000 of them." He left everything to be split evenly between Daniel and me, with Daniel named as executor because he lived closer and, in Dad's words, needed the responsibility to grow into a man. I hadn't argued. Grief makes you generous with trust you shouldn't give away. I called Daniel from that parking lot, my hands cold around the phone. "Danny, did you sell Dad's house?" There was a pause, just a beat too long. "I was going to tell you this weekend." "Tell me what?" "There were some debts, Elena. Dad had some debts we didn't know about. I had to move fast or we'd have lost the house to the bank anyway." Something in his voice didn't sit right. Daniel had always been the kind of liar who over-explained, who added details nobody asked for because he thought more words meant more truth. I'd watched him do it since we were kids, the time he broke Mom's china cabinet and blamed it on a raccoon that had somehow, according to his 8-year-old testimony, opened a locked back door. "What debts?" I asked. Dad didn't have debts. Dad hated debt. "I have the paperwork. I'll show you this weekend, okay? I promise." He hung up before I could ask another question. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing Dad's house, the yellow kitchen with the hand-painted tile backsplash he and Mom put in together before she passed, the garage where he taught me to change a tire when I was 14 because he said a woman should never have to wait on the side of a road for help. That house wasn't just an asset. It was the last physical place where our family had been whole. I drove to Linden Avenue the next morning. A young couple was already unloading moving boxes from a U-Haul in the driveway. I sat in my car for a long time before I got out and introduced myself as the previous owner's daughter. The woman, kind-faced and a little nervous, told me they'd bought it for $210,000, nearly $90,000 under what similar homes on that street had recently sold for. She showed me a copy of the closing paperwork because I asked gently if I could see it. The seller listed on the deed was Daniel Marsh, acting as executor and sole authorized signer of the estate of Walter Marsh. Sole authorized signer. I was named co-executor in the will. I'd read it myself at the lawyer's office. Daniel wasn't supposed to be able to sign anything alone. That's when everything changed. I drove straight to the law office of Marcus Webb, the attorney who'd handled Dad's estate planning for over a decade. I hadn't called ahead. I sat in his waiting room until he had a 15-minute gap between appointments, and when he saw my face, he cleared his whole afternoon instead. "Elena," he said, closing his office door behind me. "What's wrong?" "Daniel sold Dad's house, alone, as sole executor. I want to know how that's possible when I'm named co-executor in the will." Marcus's expression shifted from concern to something harder, more careful. He pulled a folder from a locked drawer and spread 3 documents across his desk. "This," he said, tapping the first page, "is the will your father signed with me in 2019. You and Daniel, co-executors, equal beneficiaries." He slid a second document toward me. This is a durable power of attorney, dated 6 weeks before your father died, naming Daniel as sole agent with full authority over all estate and financial matters. My stomach dropped. Dad never mentioned a power of attorney. Neither did I, because I didn't draft it. This wasn't done through my office. Marcus's jaw tightened. Elena, your father had a small stroke in the hospital 3 days before he died. Do you remember? I remembered. A minor one, the doctor said. He'd been confused for maybe 2 days, then seemed to recover. Daniel had been the one staying overnight at the hospital, insisting I go home and rest because I had a big presentation at work. This power of attorney is dated during that window, Marcus said quietly. Signed at the hospital, witnessed by a notary I've never heard of, from an office I can't find listed anywhere in the state database. I stared at the signature on the page. It looked like my father's handwriting. Almost. Elena, Marcus said, I think this document may be forged, or at the very least, signed under conditions that would never hold up as valid consent. I think you need a forensic document examiner before you do anything else. And I think you need to find out exactly what happened to that $600,000, because a $210,000 house sale is the smallest piece of a much bigger problem. I left his office shaking, but not the helpless kind of shaking, the kind that comes right before you decide to fight. That weekend, Daniel came to my apartment for the meeting he'd promised. He brought a manila folder and a nervous smile, the same one he used to wear right before asking Mom for money in high school. Before you show me anything, I said, I want to know about the power of attorney. His smile flickered. What power of attorney? The one dated 3 days before Dad died, signed at the hospital, the one that names you as sole agent over everything. Dad wanted it that way. He said you were too busy with work to deal with the stress. Dad never said that to me. Not once in 38 years did our father say he thought I was too busy to handle responsibility. He used to say I was the only one in this family who finished what she started. Daniel's face went red, the way it always did when he got cornered. You weren't there, Elena. You don't know what those last days were like. I was the one holding his hand at 3 in the morning while you were home sleeping. Then explain the notary. Marcus can't find any record of that notary anywhere in Ohio. Silence. Explain, I said again, why Dad's house sold for $90,000 under market value 3 weeks after he died to a buyer who happened to close in 11 days flat, which never happens with a normal estate sale. Daniel stood up so fast his chair scraped against my floor. You think I did something wrong? I've been drowning trying to handle this whole estate by myself while you sat back and cried at your desk. I needed cash fast. There were bills. What bills, Daniel? He didn't answer. He grabbed his folder and left, and the papers inside it, I noticed later, had never actually been opened for me to see. I hired a forensic accountant named Priya Anand the following Monday. I also hired a private investigator, a retired detective named Frank Osei, who specialized in financial fraud within families, a specialty that existed, he told me over coffee, because it happened far more often than anyone wanted to admit. It took Priya 11 days to build the first clear picture, and when she called me into her office to walk me through it, I brought a notepad because I knew I'd need to write it down to believe it. 6 weeks before our father's stroke, Daniel had opened a home equity line of credit against Dad's Linden Avenue house, using a power of attorney document dated that same week, one Marcus had also never seen. He drained $140,000 from that line over the following month. 3 separate wire transfers, totaling $92,000, went to a company called Silver Horizon Consulting, LLC. Priya traced Silver Horizon Consulting to a Nevada shell address with no employees, no website, and no business activity of any kind other than receiving wire transfers and within days, sending nearly identical amounts to a company registered in the name of a Las Vegas casino's private gaming account services division. My brother had been gambling. Not casually, not the occasional weekend trip he used to joke about. Frank's investigation turned up a pattern going back nearly 4 years: credit card cash advances, 3 maxed out lines of credit in his own name, a repossessed truck, and a second mortgage on his own house that he'd taken out and burned through in under a year. "He was underwater long before your father died," Frank told me, sliding a folder of bank records across the table. "And when your father had that stroke, your brother saw an opening." The house sale, once the estate closed, had gone almost entirely toward a debt Daniel owed to a private lender connected to that same Nevada Gaming Services account, a debt with an interest structure that Frank flatly called predatory and possibly illegal. Daniel hadn't paid off a debt. He'd fed a hole that had no bottom. I sat in that office with the folder in my lap and felt something I hadn't expected. Not just anger, grief, sharper than the day of the funeral, because I understood now that I hadn't just lost my father. I'd lost the version of my brother I thought still existed underneath all his excuses. "What do I do?" I asked Frank. "You do this the right way," he said. "Slow, documented, and legal. People like your brother make one mistake. Eventually they get comfortable because nobody's caught them yet. Let him get comfortable." For the next 2 months, I did something that cost me more than I can explain. I acted normal around Daniel. I let him believe I'd accepted his explanation about estate debts. I asked polite, harmless questions at family dinners with our aunt, questions that let him keep talking, keep contradicting himself, keep digging. Every phone call I made to him, I recorded with his knowledge under Ohio's one-party consent law, which Marcus confirmed was fully legal, and every recording went straight to Priya and Frank's growing file. The final piece fell into place when Daniel, desperate and unaware that the estate's remaining liquid accounts, the $600,000 in savings and investments, had already been quietly frozen by Marcus through an emergency probate court petition, tried to submit a second forged authorization to the investment firm managing Dad's brokerage account. He wanted to liquidate the entire portfolio and transfer it to an account in his name alone, citing executor authority. The firm's compliance officer, following protocol after Marcus had already flagged the estate as under dispute, called me directly to verify the request. I told her the truth. 3 weeks later, I sat across from Daniel in a small windowless room at the Franklin County Probate Court, our Aunt Carol beside me for support, a court-appointed mediator between us, and Marcus with a stack of evidence thick enough to require its own chair. Daniel looked smaller than I remembered. His hands wouldn't stay still on the table. "You're really doing this," he said. "You're really taking me to court over Dad's money." "I'm taking you to court over Dad's forged signature," I said. "Over a fake notary. Over $140,000 that went to a casino while I was planning his funeral alone, because you told me you had it handled. I was going to pay it back." "With what, Daniel? You don't have anything left. You lost your own house as equity too. Frank found that. Did you know I know that?" He didn't answer. His eyes were wet, but I'd learned by then not to trust that on its own. I'd watched him cry over broken dishes and blamed raccoons. The judge, reviewing the forensic accounting report, the forged power of attorney, and the document examiner's conclusion that the notary seal used was counterfeit and traceable to a man later found to be running fraudulent notarizations for cash across 3 counties, did not take long to rule. The power of attorney was voided as invalid, obtained through fraud during a period of documented medical incapacity. Daniel was removed as executor entirely. The house sale, while it couldn't be undone since the young couple who bought it had acted in good faith, became the basis for a civil judgment against Daniel personally, for the full difference between the fair market value and the sale price, plus the drained equity line, totaling nearly $230,000. The remaining estate assets, protected by Marcus's early freeze, were distributed properly, with the court appointing an independent executor to finish the process cleanly. My half arrived 9 months after that meeting in the probate court, smaller than it should have been because of what Daniel had already burned through, but untouched by any further forgery. Daniel filed for bankruptcy 4 months after the judgment. It didn't erase the debt, since fraud-related judgments typically survive bankruptcy, something Marcus made sure the court record reflected clearly. The gaming services company connected to Silver Horizon Consulting was later investigated separately by state financial regulators after Frank's findings were referred to their office. part of a larger pattern involving predatory lending tied to gambling debts that, according to a local news report I read months afterward, resulted in 2 arrests unrelated to Daniel himself. I didn't see my brother again for almost a year. He reached out first, a short email, no excuses this time, just a single line. "I know what I did. I'm in a program now. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that." I didn't answer right away. I sat with it for 2 weeks, walking past the empty lot where Dad's construction company used to have its yard, now sold to a developer building townhomes. Another piece of him gone, but at least gone honestly this time, through a proper sale I'd overseen myself as the new independent cosigner on the remaining estate assets. Eventually I wrote back. Not forgiveness, not yet, just 3 words. "I hope so. We are not close now. Maybe we never will be again in the way we were before, back when he was the 8-year-old blaming raccoons and I was the 12-year-old who believed him because that's what sisters do. But I heard, through our Aunt Carol, that he's been sober from gambling for 14 months, that he pays a portion of the judgment every month from a stable job he's held onto, slow and steady, brick by brick, the way our father used to talk about building anything worth having. I used part of my inheritance to do something I think Dad would have appreciated more than any lawsuit ever could. I bought a small lot 2 streets over from Linden Avenue and designed a house myself, using some of the same fixtures salvaged from Dad's old place before the sale closed. The yellow kitchen tile, restored and reset into a new backsplash, and the garage workbench where he taught me to change a tire. Some nights I sit in that kitchen with a cup of coffee, and I don't think about the forged documents or the courtroom or the fake notary anymore. I think about my father saying $1 saved is a brick laid, and I understand now that he wasn't just talking about money. He was talking about the kind of person you choose to be when nobody's watching, brick by brick, until the wall either holds or it doesn't, mine held.